Hey guys, welcome to today's video where we'll be doing the football season preview for the Louisville Cardinals. Last year I picked them to be 4-8 with the 2-6 conference record. They actually went 10-2, 7-1 in the ACC and played in the ACC championship game. And really last year there were two teams that I was completely wrong on, and that was Louisville and Pittsburgh. I thought Pittsburgh was going to be way better with Phil Dracovic and Pat Narduzzi at the helm. And really they had a disappointing season. And Louisville, I thought, was going to have some struggles in Jeff Brom's first year, and really surprised the conference with a championship game performance. They did have a very favorable schedule, but they had some hard wins, particularly against Notre Dame, which, although they're not a conference opponent, they have had some very prolific success against the ACC. And then that win on the road against NC State in kind of an ugly game, but still getting the win in a very tough place to win, that being Carter Finley. For departures, Jack Plummer is gone, the quarterback from last year. Cornerback Jarvis Brownlee, linebacker Jalen Alderman, edge Tyler Barron, and running back Penny Boone. Some significant losses for Louisville, particularly on the defensive side. The defensive line is not expected to be as good as last year's, although you do add defensive line Thor Griffith, who can be a good starter for you and depth piece depending on how the staff wants to use him rotating in. For the corners, though, you have a lot of depth with Corey Thornton, Tavion Nicholson, and Tavon Holloway all transferring in this year. I don't expect your secondary to have any problems this year. Running back Donald Chaney also transfers in, and Ja'Cory Brooks, the wide receiver, transfers in. He looks to be a big threat for Tyler Shough, who also transfers in, and he's expected to be your starter. He's an experienced journeyman who's been at Texas Tech and Oregon, so a lot of experience with him at the quarterback position. The number one question, though, is can he stay healthy? It's one of the problems that he's had throughout his career, is not being able to play a complete season. But like I said, depth at corner. I would say you have playmakers at the wide receiver position, but you don't really have a 3-4 wide receiver that people are really confident in, including myself. There is some concerns at safety. You do have some really good starters there. And as I said before, defensive line. Your starters will be good enough to stack up against whoever you're playing. It's just as the game goes on and you have to rotate guys, how is the defense going to do? But I still think Louisville's going to be a really good team. They have a lot of experience at certain positions, particularly linebacker. And they're going to have some outstanding play at corner. The offensive line will also be really good. And as long as Tyler Shough is in the game, they're going to have offensive production. So strengths I have is the offense, barring the wide receivers, particularly your tight ends. I think your tight ends are going to be a big receiving threat as well this year. You've got 2 or 3 tight ends that are really, really good. Cornerback, of course, and your linebackers. Weaknesses, I think your wide receiver depth and defensive line. I think you've got a good wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Beyond that, I think you're still looking for people to step up for that full wide receiving core and who's going to start at the 3 and 4 position. But let's get into the schedule. You start off week 1 against Austin Peay. This should be an easy win for you. And following that up with Jacksonville State, again, I think that'll be an easy win for you. Then you have your bye week, and you take on Georgia Tech after that. They're a very capable team. It was a good game last year, very close. I believe it ended 39-34, and Georgia Tech took the lead, kind of lost it, and then almost came back with a late fumble that you recovered to basically seal the game. I think it'll be an entertaining game again this year, with Haynes King being more improved, Jamal Haynes being more improved, and Eric Singleton Jr., along with the rest of the Georgia Tech offense. I think their defense is a little bit worse than yours, though. with your offense being about the same. They probably have a little bit more of a playmaking ability because Shough is not really known as a scrambler. He's more of like a pocket passer, whereas Haynes King can do either. So it'll be a really interesting matchup. But I will give you the win against the Jackets, particularly because you're at home and the defense that you have compared to Georgia Tech's. Then you go on the road and you play Notre Dame. Riley Leonard is there now. And Notre Dame is one of the hardest places to win at. You did beat them last year, but obviously that was at home. I think you're a good team, but I don't think you're as well put together to manage a win on the road at Notre Dame. I'll have you down for a loss. Then you take on SMU. It's their first season in the ACC. They have a really interesting dynamic passing attack with Preston Stones and all the wide receivers that they have brought back from last year. I did say, though, that your corners are going to be a strength for this year's team, and I think that matchup between your corners and the Mustangs wide receivers is probably going to be the most interesting position group on your entire schedule. And I'll give you the win, again, because you're at home, and I think those corners are really talented enough to shut down the SMU wide receivers. Then you take on Virginia. You're on the road. Virginia is still in their building process with Tony Elliott, and they could have some upsets like they did last year against North Carolina, but I don't think you'll struggle too much against them. I'll give you the win. Then you take on Miami at home. Miami's an interesting team this year. I think Miami, Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State, maybe Clemson, and obviously Florida State are all in contention to play in the ACC championship game. Again, they have a very interesting receiving core that, like SMU, could be very productive, but some of those guys are transfers in, whereas SMU has had them from last year. Obviously, Cam Ward is a dynamic quarterback that will be throwing to them, but they are coming to you. It'll be a very exciting game because they'll most likely be ranked. And I think you get the win, and this will probably be your best win all season because you go on the road at Boston College, which their first year under Bill O'Brien with Thomas Castellanos and that very capable defense. I think the offense for the Eagles will be very much improved, while the defense will be very capable as it was last year. And I think you take a loss. Then you follow that up with a road game at Clemson, and every time that Louisville has played Clemson, the Tigers have won, and I don't expect that to change since you're going on the road. If this was at home for you, I think you'd have a very good shot at beating them, but on the road at Clemson, it's a very tough place to win, and I think you take another loss. And then you have your bye week. You go on the road at Stanford. I don't think this will be any problem for you. Stanford is probably going to be the worst team in the conference. This will be an easy win for you. Then you take on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has had a very rough past couple of years, particularly last year, and all the pieces that they lost on the defensive line. From a defense that wasn't even that good, they lost their defensive line coach, which was one of the weapons that they had ever since Pat Narduzzi has taken over. I could definitely see this being his last year, and I think you get the win, getting revenge from last year in what was a really disappointing loss for Louisville. And then you finish off the year at Kentucky. This was definitely a very disappointing loss. You really had an opportunity to win this game last year, and although I still think you're a really good team going on the road to Kentucky, I think you take a loss in the rivalry game, and I'll have you at an 8-4 record for this year's prediction with a 6-2 conference record, which will have you just missing out on the ACC championship game. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.